or the cloud button. There we go. So we
Thank
are.
you. All right, I'm going to start the meeting. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lila Mower, President with Kokua Council. Happy New Year. Actually, it's the end of the first month of the new year, but Happy New Year nevertheless. We're very pleased to have Ernie Lau, professional engineer, chief engineer, manager of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and some of the members of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply join us. There are members of our legislature, the 2022 legislature, and members of our community here to listen to Ernie and to discuss our concerns. So at this point, I am going to change to gallery view. Will everyone?
I'm not
sorry.
getting it. Okay, we are live on Facebook and we are recording.
Okay, all right. First of all, unless you are recognized to speak, will you please mute your microphones? And when you would like to speak or make a comment or ask a questions, please indicate so using the hand icon or the chat box. Okay, so at this point, Ernie, welcome. I'm Lila Mower, first time meeting in person via Zoom. We would like to hear your presentation, your very candid thoughts about what's going on at Red Hill and your concerns. Okay, Ernie, thank you, please.
Thank you, Lila and Rick, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Ernie Lau, the Manager and Chief Engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Also joining us in the meeting today is my deputy, Ms. Ellen Kitamura. There's Ellen.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
A nice
Happy
picture
New Year.
of Hilo in the background.
Yes.
And I also have Kathleen Elliott Pahinui. She's the head of our communications office. And we also have my assistant that keeps me on schedule, Deanna Thyssen D from our office here at the Board of Water Supply. So thank you, everybody, for taking time to listen to me. I'd like to just share my presentation with you folks. Let's see, here we go. Can everybody see this? Okay. Lila, is this coming through?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, Ernie.
Okay, thanks. And Doug Matsuoka, did you take a video of me back around 2016 or something at a Red Hill meeting?
I got a video of you in 2015 and several other meetings.
Okay, well, folks, so we've been on this issue, on the Red Hill issue since 2014, January 2014, when we first learned of the leak from tech number 5, that leak back then of about 27,000 gallons of, I think it was jet fuel. And we've been trying to express our concerns about the Navy's Red Hill facility, which dates back to World War II. And unfortunately, it kind of reached a point where a catastrophic event had to occur that before I think it got everybody's attention. But for those that have been kind of monitoring this situation for all those years, mahalo for keeping on top of it. Guys like Doug, I can still find those videos online in the World Wide Web. But I just want to talk a little bit about the impact of the fuel contamination situation at Red Hill. Just say, so for everybody's knowledge, this is like a schematic of the island. If you cut it down in half, you could see the mountains, and we're surrounded by the ocean. In a way, this is a picture of our hydrologic cycle. So it starts with evaporation from the ocean, rising up to create clouds. As those clouds pass over the Ko'olau and Waianae mountains, they they drop their rain or the UA on the important watershed lands there. And that becomes our source of water. Really, it's rainfall seeping down into the lava rock. And then we're very fortunate on Oahu, especially, and like some of the other islands, we have very porous lava rock. As the islands were created, the way they were created, layer upon layer of lava flows building up the island, it created a very porous underground aquifer. So as rain percolated down from the watershed areas, fresh water is actually lighter in density than salt water. So salt water is soaking in the lava rock under the whole island. But in shown here, light blue is actually the freshwater aquifer, the freshwater lens that is actually floating on top of this salt water. And in the Mauka areas, where as the volcanic eruptions kind of came to a close, these vertical cracks in the lava as it was cool, the rift areas were cooling. They created these cracks, and then they were filled up by lava rock that was denser, that formed like walls. And behind that, it keeps fresh water. So some of our sources, especially on the windward side in Kaneohe, especially, we can drill a hole into the mountain and then tap the water behind these dike compartments and actually have water flow without pumping it. But for the rest of the island, most of the island, we depend on underground wells. An inclined shaft shown in the middle here is actually skims water off the top of the water table or the top of the freshwater aquifer. And that's like our Halava shaft, which has currently been shut down because of the Red Hill fuel contamination issues. But we also have a lot of wells that go deeper into the aquifer, like our deep wells. And in the coastal areas, especially at Honolulu itself, at Kaimuki, Veritania, and Kalihi, we have these pump stations that tap water that is under natural pressure, what we call artesian wells. This is all because of the caprock that surrounds a good part of our island, which is shown in yellow. This caprock is marine sediments and deposits, erosional deposits, and with changes in sea level over time, the caprock is not as permeable or as porous as the lava rock, so it tends to hold back the fresh water. And you can see the blue line here showing sea level. For every foot above sea level of the freshwater aquifer, we estimate there's 40 feet of fresh water below it. Very similar to a iceberg made of fresh water floating in a salty ocean. You can usually just see the tip of the iceberg, but the bulk of the mass of the iceberg is actually below the surface of the ocean. Similarly, that's how kind of our underground aquifer is built. The caprock, which is in this picture, is shown in light blue, surrounding the green of the interior of the island. The light blue represents the caprock, low permeable caprock deposits, erosional deposits, and marine sediments that hold back the fresh water and allows the aquifer to build up on the more interior parts of the island. And these are some of the large areas of the aquifer. This is from the State Water Commission on Commission on Water Resources Management. They have a map that shows the hydrologic units of the groundwater aquifers on the island with a total capacity of about 393.5 million gallons a day. This is what they project as what they call the sustainable yield. How much could be withdrawn safely without degrading the quality of that groundwater resource. You can see that it's shown in different colors. These are different areas and how the commission separated it for management purposes. Not always a actual geologic barrier where the black lines are occurring, but you can see that the Red Hill, the Navy's Red Hill facility, sits right over the aquifer. Between the Waimalu and Moana Loa systems, aquifer systems on this map. So most of the 20 tanks and a good part of the 3.5 miles of pipeline are actually located right above our drinking water aquifer. So this is a little rendering of the underground tanks on the upper left here. They stand on end vertically, 250 feet tall, 100 feet across or in diameter, and there's 2 rows of 10 tanks. They were built in place, or what we call field constructed, between 1940 and 1943. So they basically hollowed out the mountain and built these tanks from within. The bottoms of the tanks are connected by a lower tunnel, which also carries the pipelines that connect the tank storage to Pearl Harbor. So from there, from Pearl Harbor, fuel is pumped all the way up to these tanks below Red Hill, Kapukaki, and then also it folds back by gravity back down to Pearl Harbor. And you can see the Navy's Red Hill shaft. The Navy's Red Hill shaft is actually physically connected to the same lower tunnel that carries the fuel pipelines to and from Pearl Harbor. And an important point here in that bottom left corner are that the bottoms of the tanks are about 100 feet over the aquifer or above the aquifer, the top of the aquifer being the water table. This is looking down from above from a Navy report done in 2010. Those dashed circles with numbers in them represent the actual tanks themselves. So 1 through 20. And the dashed lines between them represents the lower access tunnel carrying the fuel pipelines. But also you can see here noted in red at that little black dot with the number 2254-01. That's the state well number for that source. And it's actually connected to that lower tunnel. The Red Hill shaft is similar to our Halava shaft. It has a horizontal tunnel that is actually fully submerged in the water table. And it basically sucks water, which skims water off the top of the water table and then pumps it out into their water system to their customers. So this is the source that the Navy believes was contaminated back in November, perhaps as early as May. And that water, fuel contaminated water, got into their drinking water system for the U.S. Navy for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. It did not affect the Board of Water Supply system, just the Navy's water system that they own and operate. And they serve about, I think, around 93,000 people. This is looking down, say, from 10,000 feet, looking down from above. And you can see the outlined in black here is the Navy property at Red Hill for their bulk fuel storage facility. The black black dots represent the tops of the tanks. And you can also see the Navy's Red Hill shaft here. This gives you a nice picture of the Board of Water Supply or BWS wells that are 4 closest wells located to the north, and then our BWS Mauna Loa wells located to the south. The closest being our Halava shaft, which is a very large drinking water source for us. And it's a little less than a mile across the Halava Valley.
Ernie, we lost your volume, I think. Everybody else hear him?
That cannot happen to our BWS customers. And because of that, we took the precaution to shut our wells that we thought might be impacted by fuel leaks coming from this Red Hill facility. And the most recent event, we shut them down. The Navy has also shut down 2 sources. So shown here is Red Hill shaft, but across Halava Valley, as you going west, you enter Aiea town. It's right around there is their Aiea Halava shaft. They've also secured that and not are operating that source as a precaution, just like us. Important point is that the 5 nearest wells, 4 to the northwest and the 1 to the south, we test them weekly and we haven't detected any fuel contaminants in them. And we've been testing them since 2014 for 8 years now. So the question we had was, how is this underground aquifer? Because this underground aquifer that the Navy relies upon for drinking water and also the Board of Water Supply, we tap the same connected underground aquifer systems. It's almost like two straws in a cup of water. One straw on one side of the valley, Halawa Valley, toward the Mauna Loa side is the Navy straw with the Red Hill shaft. And we're on the other side of the valley with our Halawa shaft and our other wells, and we are tapping the same aquifer. So our concern was the potential for fuel contamination emanating from this facility, and that includes the tanks and the pipelines, somehow migrating with being carried with the groundwater that is moving flow across the valley. And we felt that based on field data collected by the USGS multiple times in the past number of years, working with the Navy, the Board of Water Supply, and the Department of Land and Natural Resources, that they shows that there is a kind of a flow gradient or groundwater flow direction that we think can move fuel across the valley. But that's really the million-dollar question right now too. Excuse me. This is actually from a Navy's groundwater modeling report that was submitted as part of the administrative order and consent, the agreement that the Navy, Department of Health, and EPA and Defense Logistics Agency signed back in 2015 as a result of the 2014 leak from tank number 5. In this model, they did something called particle track modeling, and they ran multiple versions of the model. And for each line here that's shown in different colors, it's almost like a rainbow, is actually a model run from the particle track model. And the question here is to see if a particle of fuel that leaks out of the Red Hill facility or fuel facility, could that particle of fuel make it to a well or other, what they call a receptor? So you can clearly see that there are quite a few lines that lead from the fuel tanks all the way across to Halawa shaft.
What?
Shoe repair place.
When you come back?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, somebody's mic is on. If you can mute yourself, thank you. And there's also, other lines that lead to other wells across the valley. The white blocked areas are the redacted portions of that report. We think the one closest to the Red Hill facility is kind of where their Navy Red Hill shaft is located. And the other white box there is, I think, where their Aiea Halawa shaft might be. Shown on this map is Halawa shaft 1 and 2. We think that's a mistake, and actually that might be our Halawa well. And to the left of that, to the north is, we think there's no label there. That might be our Aiea wells. You can see the particle tracks eventually take the fuel particles all the way out to near Kalawao Springs and Pearl Harbor. I think this is evidence that we need to take the precautionary approach and keep our wells shut off, because we cannot afford to provide any of you that live in the Honolulu water system with fuel contaminated water, or in the Aiea Halawa system also. This is still preliminary and pending Department of Health and EPA approval. Just for kind of a comparison, remember earlier I said that the Navy's Joint Base Pearl Harbor water system provides water to about 93,000 people. The Board of Water Supply system island-wide is much larger. We serve about 1 million people every day with drinking water, and that's about 145 million gallons a day that we have to pump from our water sources or take from our water sources and provide that to our community. We have a lot of sources. We have treatment facilities in central Oahu. We pump to water tanks, and they're concrete tanks up on the ridges that you can see, and they're there to store water for peak demands and for fire protection. And we also boost water to higher elevations where people live on the ridges that are not where our wells are located. We have to pump water from the lower elevations up to the higher ridge areas. And in total, we have 170,000 customers. For the Honolulu system, which extends from the Pearl Harbor area, from Halawa all the way out to Hawaii Kai, And these blue lines represent our representation of all the pipelines in that system. And this is only the portion of the Honolulu system that serves the lower elevations, the coastal areas where most of the people live, where you have places like Waikiki, even the state capital is located, Queens Hospital, a lot of people living in this system. We bring over time, because Honolulu grew as a city, initially the water sources or wells within urban Honolulu was able to keep up with the demand, able to meet the demand of the people living there. So originally we could supply Honolulu with our major pumping stations like at Kalihi, Beretania, Wilder, and Kamiki. But over time, that demand grew larger than the sources that we had within Honolulu. So we had to go westward to look for water to supply Honolulu's demands. So we ended up in the Pearl Harbor area, like at Halawa Shaft, also developed around the 40s, the mid 40s, to bring water all the way, pump it all the way into large pipelines and bring it into urban Honolulu to meet the demands of Honolulu. Halawa Shaft can provide water that can even reach all the way out to Hawaii Kai. To the left of this slide, going toward Aiea further toward Aiea, we have other wells, large wells that also pump water into Honolulu. So we depend on Pearl Harbor water imported to also meet the demands of Honolulu. And it's a much larger system. I think we estimate over 400,000 people live in this system. In addition to all the businesses, government services, schools, hospitals that are here, including the large hotels concentrated in Waikiki. The Navy a few years ago, as part of the administrative order and consent, had to do a risk assessment to assess the potential risk of the bulk fuel storage facility at Red Hill. And phase one of that risk assessment, this report, they took a quantitative approach using methodologies that they would estimate risk for nuclear facilities. And they came up with this based on the historical information that they were able to get from the Navy. 27% probability of a release between 1,000 and 30,000 gallons of fuel each year from this facility. Greater than a 34% chance of a sudden release of more than 120,000 gallons of fuel in the next 100 years. A 5% probability of a release more than 1 million gallons of fuel in the next 100 years. Chronic releases, this is important also, every year that could be occurring that are below the Navy's ability to actually detect that release. And that's estimated to be about 5,803 gallons a year facility-wide. So you can see this facility is a kind of a high-risk facility. And remember, almost 100% of this facility lies over our drinking water aquifer. And today, right now, in those fuel tanks and pipelines, they probably store over 180 million gallons of fuel, jet fuel and diesel. That's just 100 feet or so above our drinking water aquifer. And that's why we've maintained for the last 8 years the need for this facility to be upgraded or removed. And because of the recent events, our position is they need to empty out the facility as soon as possible, and also to not bring it back, to relocate fuel storage elsewhere where it won't impact a drinking water aquifer on Oahu. Recent history of releases. In ALC studies, 72 releases based on the different reports from the Navy and data. We estimate that's probably around 200,000, close to 200,000 gallons of fuel releases over its nearly 80-year history. And I mentioned the January 2014 leak. March 2020, a leak at Kilo Pier. This is right at Pearl Harbor where they load and unload fuel onto ships. In May 2021, last year, they had partial surges in this pipeline that carries fuel to and from Pearl Harbor. And this is a 16-inch diameter steel pipeline that's welded together. They had a partial surge, I think we'd commonly think of it like a water hammer occur in their piping. Remember when you are using water in your home, sometimes when you shut the pipe, your faucet too quickly, you might hear your pipes rattle or make a noise. And that because when you're shutting a water that's flowing off quickly, you can create a pressure surge because all that momentum of the water going out of the faucet is then suddenly stopped. And that creates a pressure surge that can reverberate back into your pipes and rattle your pipes and make a noise there. In this case, it was a pressure surge in a 16-inch diameter steel pipe carrying JP5 jet fuel. And that pressure surge, I think the Navy's report estimated that the pressure surge was over 300 PSI or 300 pounds per square inch. So it caused a failure in that pipe. And I happened to go in there on December 15th last year with Congressman Kahele and saw firsthand that it was about a 5-foot section or so of 16-inch steel pipe that blew out from its mounts located just connecting tank number 20, and it blew out and released what we think is maybe 19 or 20,000 gallons of jet fuel into that lower tunnel. The release occurred over about a 50-second period, but if I try to do some calculations, I'm an engineer, so I tried to do some math and calculate what that flow rate would be in gallons per minute. And it calculated out to something like 24,000 gallons per minute flowed out of, for a brief moment, less than a minute out of that pipe, out of tank number 20. There's also another leak near tank number 18 because the steel pipeline also moved 8 inches to one side because of the pressure surge in that pipe. What is 24,000 gallons of fuel or 24,000 gallons per minute? When a car hits a fire hydrant and knocks off the fire hydrant, you might create this geyser coming out of the ground that goes maybe close to 100 feet in the air. That might be 2,000 gallons a minute. Just imagine 12 of those fire hydrants being knocked off all side by side in the same geyser. So there's a lot of fuel that came out into that lower tunnel in a very short period of time before they should shut the valve down. In September of last year, they had these pressure surges again in their fuel pipelines. And because of that, and they did not inform the Department of Health, they on their own elected to shut down the facility for 9 days to investigate before they reactivated the facility. And then in November, they estimated a 14,000 gallon release there of fuel, and they now suspect that that release might be related to the May release in 2021. And we're waiting anxiously for the investigative report from the Navy that they recently completed. Hopefully that'll be released without any redactions in its full version to the public. So really, the challenge right now for us, impact on the Board of Water Supply, we don't have any fuel contamination problems in our water system, and there's no fuel contaminated water going to our customers that we serve in these systems. But really, we're short on supply right now because we, as a precaution, are shutting down 3 wells. Halava Shaft, one of our largest wells for the Honolulu system, representing about 20% of the supply for the Metro Honolulu area. Our Halava and Aiea wells, they serve a smaller system, but they represent about 50% of the supply for that smaller system. That smaller system also serves the Pearl Ridge Shopping Center and the Palimomi Hospital. So we are going to enter into a period of challenges. Right now, we're doing okay because this is a kind of a balancing act. We want to make sure that the water use, or what people use water from the system, can be provided from our available supply or our sources from our wells. So it's kind of this balance between water supply and water usage. And right now, because we're short on supply because of this Red Hill fuel contamination situation that's affecting the aquifer, we are going to have to very carefully balance supply and demand, supply and demand here. Especially right now, it's not too bad because it's cool. We've had rain, so people are not using water as much. Well, every year in the summertime when it's hot and dry, that's when we really see demand start to increase. So that will be the period of time that we're gonna struggle. And I'll just ask your Kokua, everybody that's on this meeting, to please, when we ask for water conservation, especially in the Honolulu and the Aiea Halawa water system, we need your Kokua because we're trying to make sure that our supply can cover the demand. If demand is greater than supply, what we'll see in our water system, we'll see that the water tanks that we have up on the hills, that we will not be able to refill them in a 24-hour period. That over time, those tanks would get lower and lower in the amount of water that they contain, or the water level in those tanks. And at certain times, there could be periods where people will experience low pressure and maybe even run out of water. But understand that when we ask for conservation, we really need everybody's help. It is, I'll just be frank, it's not going to be easy. We can only hope for a wet summer, but when we hit a period of drought and there are hot, dry summers like we experienced a few years ago, that will be the greatest time of struggle. So some tips for water conservation is, there are 7 tips. Please go to boardofwatersupply.com for more information on how to save water. These are some common ways to look at saving water and reducing leaks and waste in your home. In summary, we've shut down our Halawa shaft, our Aiea wells and Halawa wells. And the Navy's also shut down their Aiea Halawa shaft. They did inform us that there was a substantial detection of petroleum in their sample taken, what we believe is water from their Aiea Halawa shaft. And about 2 hours later, they tried to walk that back. But we're operating on the basis from what we see from information that they provide, that water may be indicative of what could have been in the aquifer in that area. And the concerning thing about that is that's on the same valley as our Halawa shaft, our Aiea wells and Halawa wells. We maintain that continued storage of fuel above the aquifer endangers this precious water, irreplaceable water resources from further contamination. And they need to immediately relocate the fuel away from the aquifer and put it in other locations, not over the aquifer. We are going to need everybody's Kokua, especially in Metro Honolulu, Aiea and Halawa areas. That being from the Iwa Street all the way westward to Hekaha Street and Aiea to conserve water. And we're going to closely monitor use or demand and supply from our sources and communicate that to our community on an ongoing basis throughout the year. This situation won't go away quickly because the investigations that are needed, there needs to be more investigation into the nature and extent of the contamination of the aquifer from the Red Hill facility, from the different field release events or leaks. And then also we need to have a high degree of confidence that we won't be pumping fuel. There's no potential for us to pump fuel contaminated water into our water system. To develop, we're also looking at replacement wells at other locations, but those will take years to develop. So we need everybody's help on this situation. We're also looking for employees. There's a lot of vacancies here at the Board of Water Supply. So if any of you are interested, please let us know. Are there any questions? I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
So folks, if you want to ask questions, raise your hand. We'll call on you. Oh, okay. Henry and Kat, look like you're the first ones with their hands up. What do you got? Go ahead.
Do you want to go? How long do you anticipate the shortage would last if things are optimistically or pessimistically?
Optimistically, Henry, This is maybe giving them some time, the Navy and the EP and Department of Health, to do further investigation on the nature and extent of the contamination of the aquifer, and to get their groundwater models to a place where we all feel comfortable it's representative of the what's out in the field. Maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years. Pessimistically, the scenario might be that the Navy continues to store fuel there for years and doesn't want to or wants to bring fuel back. So they empty out the fuel, and it could take a year, could take months to a year to empty out the facility from fuel. Then they want to bring it back, and they are successful in getting the health department to allow them to bring it back. Then I think at that point, then we're looking at having to implement longer term solutions. So that could go on years. I'm not 100% sure on the time frame yet, but realistically, folks, it's going to be years. A new well for us to replace the source capacity that we left takes anywhere between 5 to 10 years to develop. We can't just drill holes in the ground and install pumps overnight and start pumping water out of the ground. We wish we could do that, but we are going to actively look for locations that are outside the area of potential influence by contamination from this facility from being pumped into those wells. So we're going to go to other locations and develop more wells to replace what we lost. The other alternative is a treatment system at Aloha Shaft. I'm sorry, Kat.
That's all right. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I see your hand.
No, you can finish. I was just wondering, it seems like Board of Water Supply has been doing a lot more testing, monitoring than ever. And this must be costing your budget. So I'm wondering, is the Navy paying for all the work that the state has to do because of their mistake?
At this time, the answer is no. We're using our BWS funds to take immediate actions, but we've already put our congressional delegation on notice on the need for making our ratepayers whole, recovery of these costs, because I believe it's appropriate. This is a situation, folks. This is a situation that was completely preventable.
Yes.
There's been decades of studies, and Ernie Kawata and I have been on this for 8 years, and we've seen studies and reports going back a few decades acknowledging that there is risk from this facility. So we sent a letter to our congressional delegation asking them to make sure to include in the federal DoD budget provisos or requirements for them to reimburse us for these costs. Now, right now we're accounting for these costs. So this is where we hope to go, but I can't wait till the Navy gives us money.
No, thank you, Ernie. We
Thank
really
you so much.
appreciate you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question. Can I ask you a question?
Go for it,
Go
Doug.
ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I'm a volunteer director here at Kokua Council, also a member of Hawaii Guerrilla Video Hui, which explains my presence at a lot of the hearings, the early hearings. At the hearing on June 18th, 2015, there were a lot of political people there. There was State Senator Mike Gabbard, who has representatives here on this call, mentioned that there were 26 other tanks like the one on Red Hill. Do we know anything about those tanks, the status, and whether they represent a danger or not?
Over the years, through the legislature created the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee, and we meet once a year at least. Now, I think this year we might meet twice a year. And I know that the Navy shared about some other facilities that they're no longer using, located in Central Oahu, in the Kunia area and Waiawa area. I've really asked them for more information. I haven't gotten more information about the contamination that may have gone on in the past and what they're doing to mitigate that contamination. I know that, Doug, there was a leak in a fuel pipeline in the Mililani area along Cam Highway that was undetected for a few years. And that became I think a Superfund cleanup site there. There is another active fuel facility, field constructed facility on Kauai at Barking Sands. But on Oahu, it still is only the Red Hill facility. So I hope I answered your question, Doug.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, then Lila.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you brought up the Superfund, Ernie, because I was wondering about our abilities to tap that fund. I don't know if it exists anymore for our needs. I'm so sorry, I'm ignorant. I don't know if Superfund is part of DOD, but I thought that they were under separate departments, if you will. That's one question. We talk about the fuel contamination. And of course, we know that it means that the water is no longer potable. It's not safe for us to drink. When I read in the newspapers, hydrocarbons, things like that, I keep on thinking about cancer causing. And so not only is it not potable, but the reasons why, maybe you can go into that a little bit. I realize you're not Board of Health, Department of Health, but you may have heard about what they had to say about it. Recently in the newspapers, this is topic number 3, so sorry to be scattered, but in the newspapers and on media, we've been hearing about the redevelopment of the Aloha Stadium area. And recently they showed us pictures of the density, how many units are going to be built there. And I would think that that would affect the supply, or rather the use of supply of waters from Halawa and Aiea wells, maybe directly from the Halawa shaft. Are the people involved in the development of the stadium area in contact with you as to their water supply? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Lila, I'll try to make sure I have to, I'm a senior myself, so I am having to write this down so I can remember the questions, the multi-part questions. But first, Superfund, I'm not an expert in Superfund sites, but I don't believe I think it's a program under the EPA, and it's not under the DOD. I know that related to the Navy's Red Hill facility, they actually had a Superfund site at what they call the oily waste disposal site. So it's outside of adit number 3. Remember, this is an 80-year-old facility. When it was first built back in the 1940s, when they would clean out these tanks, empty and clean them out, they would dump the waste product outside of adit number 3. And they actually had a hole in the ground that was not lined, and they would just dump that waste product, water and oil and other things into that hole in the ground. And that became, because of the heavy contamination, that location became a Superfund cleanup site that was, I think, finally given the all clear by the Department of Health a number of years ago. And that pool of money, I'm not an expert on Superfund, this is a separate pool of money available nationally. I think there was a site related to pineapple cultivation up in Cuneo Road at a facility there that became a Superfund site, cleanup site too. So access to a different federal pot of money for cleanup. Related to the health effects, yeah, we're not the experts on health effects. And the EPA doesn't really have any MCLs or maximum contaminant level standards for fuel contaminants in drinking water, which is something I'm going to be asking an EPA official this afternoon when she comes into my office. I have a meeting with her. Why not? Because I'm sure this is not an isolated situation, not only here in Hawaii, but fuel storage and underground storage tanks are located all across the country. So why not have some kind of drinking water regulations that determine what is safe to be in the drinking water and what is not safe. The health effects, so we did our own study of the Department of Health's emergency action levels and drinking water toxicity levels a number of years ago to just see if the numbers were based on current available literature. We actually hired, I think, 2 different toxicologists looking at the information independently, working separately. And they, at the end of the day, they kind of agreed with the Department of Health environmental drinking water toxicity limit of around 160 parts per billion for TPH diesel. But the Department of Health also had an aesthetic standard or a guideline of 100 parts per billion, because at that point they felt that people would start to smell and taste fuel in their drinking water, and that was lower than the level that the Department of Health originally felt was safe for consumption. So we agreed with that 100 parts per billion. Use that as a guide for cleanup or for keeping fuel out of the drinking water. And that's actually a little bit below what is safe for people that won't create health effects. And this is only based on the literature search. Subsequently, the Department of Health raised those limits, and we have letters on our website at boardofwatersupply.com. We have the letters questioning them about it and expressing our concern about them doing that. I think right now the Department of Health, on their flushing plan for the Navy's water system, they're using 200 parts per billion for TPH diesel in the drinking water. So I'd have to defer to the health department on the health effects, but we saw from the residents in the base housing, diarrhea, skin irritations, headaches, nausea, dizziness, different effects, burning skin. I can only imagine how it must have felt. Related to the Aloha Stadium, and I would throw in also the OCCC relocation of the Oahu Community Correctional Facility. Our plan is to reach out to them. So that would be probably to DAGS to let them know about the situation, and to the Department of Public Safety and the DAGS also has the stadium authority there to brief them on the situation, because right now we don't have enough supply to meet their demands, but it depends on their development timeline when they are actually going to start to use water. So we'll be reaching out with them. We've been a little busy with some other of these Red Hill issues recently, but our plan is to reach out to DAGS and public safety to brief them on the situation. They are being served by the system that's being impacted by the Red Hill situation.
Thank you, Ernie. When you talk about hydrocarbons, some of those are carcinogenic, right? I remember reading about benzene.
Yeah, I think some of them that are regulated, are known carcinogens. Yeah, and I want to be careful. I don't see Erwin Kawata, head of our water quality division here, but we can follow up with any questions on that. But yeah, fuel is a mixed bag of chemicals. This hydrocarbon is a mixed bag, and that's why it makes it so difficult to figure out an appropriate treatment system.
Yeah, I had 2 uncles that owned a gas station in the Midwest, and they had the tanks leaked, and that remained closed for many, many years to get that out of the soil. Are we concerned about that as well?
Yes, that's very true. And actually, I have some personal experience. My uncle used to own a taro farm, or kalo farm near Pearl Ridge, and a gas station, Mauka of him, part of the shopping center, one of the stores there had a gas station, leaked, their underground storage tank leaked, and it was coming out in his springs, feeding his taro patch for years. You could smell it. You could see discolored soil there. It finally went away, but it took many, many years for it to dissipate.
Doug, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple related questions, so maybe it's a good time to butt in. I always feel like I'm butting in when I'm asking a question. But in my interview of you on March 14th, 2018, You said one of the things sort of water supply is doing was looking into water treatment systems in the event of a catastrophic leak at Red Hill. So I was just wondering of a status update on that. Plus, my second related question, is there any kind of filtration or treatment system the consumer can use, a filtering system or even a catchment system like the kind that they use on the Big Island a lot?
Yeah, so Doug, you test my memory by going back to your old videos. So 2015, in terms of the treatment, yeah, we are looking at what it will take to treat for this field. We know that in 2010, the Navy did a similar study. They actually did a study of a treatment system that could be installed at Red Hill Shaft back in 2010 because of concerns about potential field contamination at that source. And at the time in that treatment study, they came up with two technologies that would be used together. I think first of all would be try to evaporate or strip out the fuel from the water by something called air stripping, where you send the water down through a column of air that's blowing up from below through fans, and then run that water after it's gone through that process to activated carbon, similar to what the Navy is doing right now to try to clean up Red Hill Shaft. So those are the two technologies. The difficult thing is to figure out what type of concentration do you treat for when at the moment you're not detecting fuel in the water. So under what circumstances what would we treat for? Also, is it going to be jet fuel or diesel or a combination of both? The facility is 80 years old. Will it also use, we have to deal with oil, TPHO. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So we're in that study right now, Doug. We don't have any final results yet. Did I answer point of use treatment device, what we call point of use, where a consumer can use in their home to treat for petroleum contamination? I'm not aware of any technology. I'm not sure if a reverse osmosis system in your home would be successful in getting fuel contaminants out. Also remember that you're dealing with concentrations down in the parts per billion range. You have to be able to treat it to very low levels. So I just want to be careful. If you do a rain catchment system, of course, it's not coming from the aquifer. So, but you also have to make sure that the rain water that you catch on your rain catchment system is safe.
So an over-the-counter kind of filter system probably wouldn't help?
I probably not.
No, right? So you presented at the Rotary a while back, and I asked you a question, but it's fairly noisy in the room. So I'd like to ask again. So I understand this system was kind of set up in 1941, about the same time the war was going on. Were we using the aquifer for our water system then? And then my question is, how did they decide to put it there next to the water? I was a Navy hospital corpsman, and we would make sure that food wasn't next to latrines and things like that. So the military sure knew about those kinds of things. How did they choose this? Not that it solves anything, but how did they come up with this plan?
Kind of going back to your first part of your question, the facility was built between 1940 and 1943, and it was a secret facility that was built. They also installed their drinking water source around the same time Red Hill Shaft.
Together.
Supply Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. And that Red Hill Shaft is only about a half a mile away from the fuel tanks, but connected to the same fuel pipeline tunnel. And then also at the time in that area, around the mid 40s, we installed Halava Shaft, which is skimming water off the top of the water table. And we ran a pipeline that crosses over the Red Hill facility to bring the water into Honolulu, a 42-inch diameter cast iron pipe was installed. Knowledge about the potential for contamination of the aquifer and the reasons why they picked that site, I don't really know. But it was at the time of war, because the facility worked, they worked 24/7 on the facility, constructing the field facility, and only a stop for a day when Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Wow. Okay. So there's a report that we're waiting for from the Navy. What are you expecting from that report, and when will that report come out? I hear that.
Apparently the report was completed, the investigative report that was recently referred to in some of the press coverage, and that Senator Schatz pushed for the full report to be released. When to expect it, I don't know. Hopefully sooner than later. And also it'll tell us how perhaps it'll tell us how the May event and the November event are connected.
Okay. And then Henry and Kat, I see your hand up again, and follow that with Lila. Oh, you're
What I
muted,
want
though.
to-
Oh, there you go.
What
Yeah, you're
I
good,
wanted
you're
to
good.
point out is that during the war, the Navy and the military was really afraid of a military attack. So the Air Force built fuel storage annexes into the poly at Waipio, 3 times the length of football fields into the cliff. And they also built vertical shafts in Wahiwa. We were on the Hickam Air Force Space Restoration Advisory Board from 96 to 05. And it was at that time that the Air Force cleaned out their whole system and shut it down.
Oh, and
But their analysis was that 18 billion gallons of jet fuel went up, 14 billion gallons went back down. The system was empty, and the 4 billion either was a combination of evaporation, heading downward, theft, or bad accounting,
Oh, my.
all of the above.
or all of the above.
Oh, Henry, you're making me have more sleepless nights here. Oh,
I thought the Board of Water Supply did an excellent job at that time,
well,
and that
thank
was
you.
really impressed us.
I'm glad. Did the RAB also discuss issues at Red Hill?
We were on the Navy RAB also, but I
They
thought
didn't discuss it.
I thought Red Hill was really missing from that RAB.
Yeah. Ernie, this morning in front of the 6 committees, I really appreciated your asking the Navy, gee, that was a great dashboard. Can you share that? So I think you need to constantly be pushing them for transparency. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Kat. I think the Admiral loved that.
So Lila?
Okay, first of all, there's a question from our
Ernie?
audience. Ernie, do you know if the Board of Water Supply will be contacting the Department of Education regarding their schools being affected by the spill? Same question with Polimomi Hospital. And then that same person added that Ernie Lau is simply terrific.
Please, it's kind of embarrassing. We will probably be reaching out to the Department of Health, especially for their schools in the Honolulu water system and Aiea Hanaba water system. The schools that are served by the Navy's Red Hill system or Navy's water system are the Navy's responsibility to address their needs for water. They're not BWS customers, but we will be reaching out to the Department of Health about conserving water and finding and fixing leaks within the school system, especially in Honolulu and Aiea and Hanaba.
And what was it? The Polimomi Hospital?
Excuse me, yes, that's actually a good point to contact Polimomi, but also I think the others are Kaiser Hospital, Kuakini, Queens, Straub, Kapiolani. and probably the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation too, just to let them know what's happening. And what we're trying to do, there's no reason for a panic. We're trying to make sure that the water is not contaminated with fuel that gets into the hospitals. Queens does have their own well, so they're a little bit more self-sufficient, but the rest of the hospitals depend on the BWS.
So Ernie, besides what we have already in terms of wells, I know you said that we may need to build more. However, it takes many, many years to get there. Talking about future plans for water, does the Board of Water Supply look at, like, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, desalination processes? People tell me, well, what's wrong with all the seawater? Why can't we use that? But then I don't think we have. I know other countries are looking at it. Do we have the capacity? Are we looking at it?
Funny you should ask. We actually have a project that is currently in the procurement process. So I can't share too much details about that since it's going through the procurement process. It is for a seawater desalination plant to be constructed in Kalaeloa. Initially a 1.7 million gallon a day facility with the expandable capacity to 5 million gallons a day. We hope that we will continue to get support for some of the costs from the Bureau of Reclamation, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. That might cover maybe 25% of the project costs. The target is to try to get the system operational by the ending of 2024. And that's a seawater desalination plant. And we actually started this project as a action to build resiliency of our water supply by diversifying our water sources. Of course, we strongly support reuse of wastewater where appropriate, and not over, in areas that will not contaminate the aquifer, but is appropriate uses like for irrigation of golf courses, parks, landscaping along the roadways.
Thank you. Rick, can you please read the question there from Ian?
Okay,
It's in the
or Ian,
chat
do you want to read it, Ian, or?
Sure thing. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I've been doing everything I can think of. I invited you to that neighborhood board meeting a few weeks back, and you presented there.
Hi, Ian.
I really appreciated that. We passed a resolution. I'm volunteering pretty much every time I can for anything going on. None of that seems to be like enough. What can people be doing right now that'd be the most effective to try to help us mitigate or do something about this disaster? Thank you.
Thank you. And Ian, you're correct in calling it a disaster. I should say environmental disaster here that we're experiencing, and it could be far worse. I've been encouraging people to get really educated on this issue. It's a kind of a complex issue, but if you can get more educated, you can start to articulate your concerns, and our elected officials are extremely important. Like I've said, I think before, we need to all speak with one voice on this issue, from the local level, at the city level, all the way up to the federal level. Making your voices heard all the way up through all our elected decision makers is very important. This is a federal facility, and it will require a federal action, federal appropriations to deal with it. So that means Congress. So our congressional delegation is extremely important too. The other thing too is we can get fatigued about this issue over time. It's like news stories. They go on for a few weeks, and then after a while, you don't hear about them anymore. But folks, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And we've been running this marathon for about 8 years now, and we don't see an end to it. So we don't think that this thing will be just resolved overnight. That even with all this pressure and progress we've made, and I thank the health department for the emergency order, that's kind of a step in the right direction, but we need to continue to press on that because it will take a lot of effort and more time to get this resolved. Our regulators need our support and our encouragement to be very assertive with the Navy, which is the polluter in this situation, which is the cause of the problems. So we need our regulators to have courage and to be assertive, to hold the military accountable, to do the right thing, to protect our health and our environment, to protect our water resources. We need to do that.
Water's life. I mean, we got to have clean water.
Oh, my
Doug?
Lord.
I'm sorry.
I have another question. Well, I see Alan has a question, so let me do
Yeah.
first. Alan, he has now.
Thank you. I think what we're all skirting around is the issue of permanent closure, decommissioning. Ernie, what are our best ways of trying to get this thing decommissioned? What suggestions do you have? I'm kind of distressed that up until now in this discussion, I haven't heard the term decommissioning or an equivalent being mentioned. I can't imagine that we would all be satisfied with what's in the emergency order, which is basically giving the Navy the opportunity to clean up its act supposedly, and then go back to the same old ways of having this sort of Damocles hovering over our aquifer for another 50, 75 years. I mean, we got to get rid of it. I hear it, you're talking around it in the way you're describing it, Ernie, but I'm not hearing anything that's really saying we've really got to close this down. What do we do?
Yeah, thank you, Alan, and I apologize for not being clear on our position. Is the fuel needs to be emptied out of it. They need to defuel as quickly as possible, and they need to relocate. And I guess relocate would be decommission the current facility where it lies. Remember, this is a 80-year-old facility, and then move that fuel to locations that are not over, or that don't endanger a drinking water aquifer. And it could be locations within the state of Hawaii. It could be locations elsewhere. It could be private storage. But bottom line, I agree with you 100%, Alan. Do not continue to use the Red Hill facility that is currently where it's currently located and configured. If they even try to tell us that they can fix it all up, they'll spend $1 billion to improve it. One thing that we need to think about is we have to take a long view of the situation. That right now, 80 years ago, when this facility was built, it was brand new. And probably at the time they said they never have any problems like this. So if they go in and we allow the Navy to continue to operate and be able to upgrade this facility, we're just passing the problem down to our future generations, because they may face the same situation we're in today, 80 years from now, with a facility that hasn't been properly maintained and operated, and is contaminated, continue to contaminate the aquifer. So Alan, I agree with you 100%. Decommission, relocate the fuel to locations outside, other locations that won't put our aquifer at risk. Take that sword away from it being held above our heads.
Yeah, good plan.
Thank you, Bernie. Ernie, you're one of our heroes for sure.
We're doing our job. Yeah, thank you.
Doug, do you have a follow-up to that?
No, that was my question exactly. So that there's a hashtag on social media, ShutDownRedHill. So if it said Ernie Lau says ShutDownRedHill, that would be accurate, no?
Yeah, that would be. I've already stuck my neck out so much already, so what the heck?
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
But Doug, please don't do that hashtag. I don't know anything about social media stuff.
I won't use it. I was kind of in the way of a hypothetical question. So you answered very clearly, very unambiguously, and which shows you're probably not a politician, but thank you anyway. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So does anybody else have questions? I don't see any more hands up.
You know, I like the discussion where it's going. So what can we do? You know, do we write as a group? Do we write as individuals to our congressional delegates because it is a federal issue? Is there a petition that's ongoing? Do we need to create a petition? You know, I'm open to suggestions.
Lila, is that a question for me or for the group?
For you and even for Henry. Henry, you have years of advocating. What would you suggest?
I think the most important thing is to get Congress to allocate the funds so that we can fully fund Board of Water Supply and Department of Health to move forward.
And we've got to push for transparency so that they actually release really good information.
And that can also be done through a congressional requirement.
Since it's a Navy facility, can't that be taken out of the $700-800 billion defense appropriation you get?
They have money.
They have money, but it would probably be better for a congressional order or legislation. Certainly you could put Senator Inouye stuck a huge allocation in for Kaho'olawe. You could do the same thing for Red Hill.
Yes.
You know, folks, one thing I would say that although this looks like a very daunting, challenging situation, together we can accomplish this. And it's my vision that that the facility will be defueled and permanently relocated, and the aquifer restored or cleaned up. That's my hope, and that's what we're trying to work for.
Yeah, it seems like the only opposition we would have would be the military for some odd reason, but I don't think I've heard any citizen say anything otherwise, right?
Ernie, I'm sorry, I have a question. Ernie, you're an engineer. How long do you think it would take realistically? If they put a lot of effort into it, how long to defuel Red Hill?
Doug, I don't really have an idea, but I think there's a deadline of February 2nd coming up for a plan and a schedule for the corrective actions for defueling the facility. And I would just kind of wait to see what they come up with.
Well, I'm aware of that deadline. I'm just afraid that they'll say, well, it'll take 15 years or 10 years or something like that.
Are they gonna wait for the groundhog to decide?
And I'm assuming that it can be done more quickly. And I was just wondering if you had an opinion on.
I do know that, you know, when tank number 5 leaked, because they had just repaired tank number 5 and they were refilling it, and they didn't follow the procedures on refilling. But I think I recall it might have taken 5 or 7 days just to empty the tank out. Remember, you got 20 tanks, and right now there may be 15 of those tanks that have fuel in it, and they all use the same 3 pipelines to move fuel up and down from Red Hill down to Pearl Harbor. So the process, and then also at Pearl Harbor, you need someplace to put the fuel once you unload it. So you'd have to bring in tanker ships or barges, fuel barges, to unload the fuel into it to remove it. So I think it is going to take a while, maybe months to unload.
Months and not
This
years.
is my best guess right now, but I really want to see. I want to be positive that the Navy will meet that February 2nd deadline. I also want to see that the I would like to see that they don't file a legal challenge to the emergency order, something that they have not yet committed in writing to not do.
Thanks for
Ian,
that. Ian has a question.
On the part about federal funding, this was actually the first question asked to Representative Kahele at that meeting. I was asking because there is a February 18th deadline for putting some of these requests for the upcoming 2023 Department of Defense funding package. So the answer we heard from Representative Kahele was he was inclined not to include this because he believed that the taxpayer shouldn't be as directly on the hook, and it should come out of the rather large existing Department of Defense budget. That's not necessarily my preference, but that was what Representative Kahele provided along with his rationale.
Okay, it sounds like it's trying the DoD prioritizing how they want to spend their money and where.
Okay, well, we're nearing the 1 o'clock deadline for our meeting. Ernie, thank you very much for all the information. This is something very basic, a very basic question I have. I believe it was answered when I was in elementary school, but I can't remember. How much time does it take for rainwater to become potable water?
Okay, so a drop of rain falling on our Mauka watersheds to get to the underground aquifer that we actually pump out. Traditionally, we've been using, like 25 years. You could take that drop of rain to show up in your tap at your home. Depending also on the size of the watershed too. It could be even shorter. What we did find that the bottoms of the tanks are about 100 feet above the aquifer at Red Hill. That when the leak occurred in those tanks or in the pipeline, it looks like it showed up into the aquifer in a time of months. But for a drop of rain falling on the Mauka watersheds, it is years, perhaps 25 years.
So for us to replenish our supply is in terms of multiples of time for the water to be contaminated.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to malama the watersheds, malama it because that's the sponge that collects the rain that feeds, restores, replenishes our underground aquifers. But those actions are a long time scale. They don't happen right. The benefits don't show up immediately, but they're important to keep on doing.
Well, thank you very much, Ernie, for bringing this, for participating and educating us and making us aware of how tragic this disaster is for all of us. I know that you became emotional here. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. But thank you very much. I'll try to share as much information with Kokua Council members that I was able to glean from this. I'd like to share the Board of Waters water supplies conservation tips on your website. Is there any other websites that we should access that can give us more information?
We can get back to you, Lila. What we're trying to do is also create links on our own website and make it easier for people to find information. The Department of Health's website on Red Hills got some good information. Also the EPA's website. I think the EPA's URL is epa.gov/red-hill. That'll take you on, you get access to all the latest reports under the Administrative Order and Consent, AOC. So Department of Health and EPA websites are good sources too. The Navy does have for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam their own website that gives updates to what's happening with the flushing And I just got a copy recently of their Red Hill shaft flushing plan off of the Navy's Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam website. It's over 200 pages. So I just downloaded that the other day.
All right, I look forward to receiving those. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any last questions? If not, thank you very much, Ernie. We realize how huge the problem is. And for us who are advocates, what we have to do to try to move this towards a healthy, safe conclusion for all of us. So thank you, Ernie, and the members of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply for joining us. Thank you to the Kokua Council audience. Please malama yourselves and Aina. Thank you very much.
Aloha and mahalo, everybody.
Mahalo. Bye,
Nice to s-
everyone.
Nice to see some old friends. Mahalo.